Every team, as it steps into a year, has a few boxes it just needs to check off. And the two biggest boxes for the 49ers coming into this year were, is Brock Purdy healthy and ready to go? And is the Nick Bosa deal done? Now, Purdy might have wrapped up his box ahead of schedule. The Bosa box obviously wasn't ticked until yesterday afternoon, but it officially gets filed under better late than never. Why do you think it took so long to tick that final box? And like, as you said, forget about the time. Mission accomplished. They got done what they needed to get done before the year started.
It's funny that you bring that up because say you're a 49ers fan, you just went off the radar, after the NFC Championship game against the Eagles, and you just woke up yesterday. You would think that the offseason went seamlessly. Nick Bosa's under contract. Brock Purdy's healthy again. The team looks to be just healthy, headed back into the season. You'd be excited, and you would have no idea kind of the turbulent offseason that was the 49ers offseason. But on the Nick Bosa front, I think it's just a complicated contract on multiple levels. And we can start with just the precedents, right? The previous deals for edge rushers, whether that's TJ Watt, or even if you want to include Aaron Donald, an interior defensive lineman in there, they're a couple years old. And so there's no, latest and greatest deal that Nick Bosa's agent and the 49ers can point to and just say, hey, here's a comparable deal. Let's just slap on a few $1,000,000 on top of this to boost the guarantees, boost the average annual value, and then say you're the highest paid defensive player and let's just move on, right? I mean, you look at Joey Bosa's deal, it's like almost 3 years old now. Take a look at Watt's deal, it's a couple years old. And so it's hard to build, a total value, an average value, and as well as guaranteed money. And then you just take into account, just inflation over the last couple of years. It's hard to come up with those numbers when you're just kind of pulling it out of thin air. And for the 49ers, they're kind of in unprecedented waters with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa truly had all the leverage. He was willing to sit games out. He is probably the best player that they've paid kind of in this run, right? Better than Debo, Kittle, Fred Warner, et cetera, et cetera. Those guys played like non-premium positions, like money-wise, whereas Nick Bosa plays one of the 2 or 3 most important positions on the field. So when you put all that together, it's just this complex negotiation. And I think it took time to get here. And I think Nick Bosa probably started somewhere in like the $140, $150 million guaranteed range and kind of worked his way down to $122 million in practical guarantees and just barely beat Aaron Donald's annual average value. I think is like $32 million and Bosa's around 34. So eventually he got what he wanted. The 49ers got what they wanted, which is to have Nick Bosa on the field week 1. So I'd say it's a win-win, even though it took a while to actually get there.
What surprises me the most about this deal is that I have no sticker shock as I look at it. It actually comes in under the guaranteed dollars that I thought, like, when I was screaming about this with Larry Krueger earlier in the week and we were picking sides of the argument. And my side was, I don't care what the number is. You pay him and then you figure out the number in the wash on the back end of this year. Just get this guy in. And Larry was saying, look, 150, 160 guaranteed $1 million is a tough pill to swallow. We're at 122.5, which again, the most amount of money the 49ers have ever guaranteed any player in the history of their franchise. So yes, it's a big number by definition, but it also, I don't have sticker shock. It's not the egregious, ungodly overpay that I thought Bosa was honestly holding out for.
Agreed. And I think when you just look at where the 49ers are in terms of their Super Bowl window, right, they've got a couple years with this crew of guys. The Kittles, the Williams, the Warners, the Bosas, etc. And so I don't think the 49ers were in a spot to penny pinch Bosa and risk him missing games, potentially starting slow to the season, maybe losing a 1 seed because of that. I just think there's too much on the line this season, right, given their Super Bowl expectations, to risk Bosa missing any games. Honestly, I thought just given where, the contract or when the contract was agreed to, just leading up to week 1 was late because now you've, Bosa's missed much of training camp or preseason and whatnot, but at least they have him on the field for week 1 in some capacity, whatever that is, which I'm assuming was the goal from the onset.
Akash Anavaranthan here with us. You got to follow him on Twitter. The information is great. It comes presented without emotion or clutching at pearls or worry. It's real information coming to you in real time. And as you said yesterday, you're the first one to point this out, that Kittle and Trent Williams, they restructured to make sure that this got done. Their salary gets converted into signing bonuses. Williams, Kittle, and Bosa, just yesterday with signing bonuses, you got Jed York penning about $79 million in contracts. And look, cash is king in football. And this is why rich owners are desired everywhere, not just by the league itself, but by any business you want your team to do. You got to be able to turn around and write a check today, cash in the bank for about $100 million at any point in time, should the situation arise. It arose. And it was really good that the 49ers got the financial wherewithal to do that, or else this probably leaks into the regular season.
True. And you are right. Cash is king in the NFL. And there's one way to kind of fudge the salary cap and make your salary cap more sustainable, and that's to pay signing bonuses up front. What that allows you is to basically prorate whatever that amount is over the life of the contract, so you can amortize that amount and kind of spread it out. And so you don't feel the salary cap hit in 1 year. And so just like you mentioned, they took Trent Williams and George Kittle's base salaries. I think they were like 18 million and 11 million respectively. They cut it down to the veteran minimum, which is around $1 million. And then they just paid that out in signing bonuses. And then they'll just spread that money, across the life of their deals, which means their cap hits in subsequent years will be higher. But they opened up nearly like $23 million of salary cap space for this season. That includes Bosa's fifth-year option price tag at like $17 million. So they've got this additional space, and they could use it one of two ways. They could front-load Bosa's deal, meaning they take the majority of that money in 2023, and you have, kind of a drop in 2024, which maybe allows you to pay a Brandon Ayuk or maybe someone else. Or you keep Bosa's cap hit where it is, or maybe lower it, and it allows you to go all in 2023. Remember the 49ers have all their picks in 2024, so maybe you trade for a veteran midseason at a position of need potentially, and now you've got the salary cap space to be able to do that. So I think they've just given them some flexibility with those restructures. And once we kind of know Nick Bosa's cap hits, we'll get an idea of why they did it.
And that's the thing. We still don't know the exact anatomy of the deal and where the particulars are and where all the commas lie. And I know that people want to know this. I don't know when it happened, but there was a huge pivot to a world of people who are not interested in their own banking, but they're really interested in the minutia and the details of NFL contracts. And it's, we are constantly in everyone else's pocket trying to figure out what they got. And it's nuts. And it's taken fans, I think, their idea of what really matters off what really matters. What really matters is game day production. And, there's so many amateur capologists out there who talk about the hard cap, the hard cap, the hard cap. It is a hard cap, but it's a hard cap based around very fuzzy and manipulatable numbers. And people don't really understand how much manipulation can be done behind the scenes with a couple of guys who are willing to restructure to open up a world of opportunities. So yesterday, Nick Bosa is signed, which should be cause for a parade up Market Street in downtown San Francisco. And one of the first things I heard was well, what about Brandon Ayuk in 2024? First of all, that's a hill we'll get to, and then we'll climb over it when we get to it. 2023 is all I care about right now. Brandon Ayuk in 2024. Again, the numbers will be massaged for that moment if they want to keep them. A football player has never, ever been cut solely because of a cap number. They get called cap casualties because it might help push.
The production doesn't meet that value, right?
Going on. Right. Yeah, there's something else there.
Yeah, exactly. And the 49ers under Shanahan and Lynch, outside of DeForest Buckner, have taken care of every star that's needed a contract. Kyle Juszczyk twice, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa. They've paid all these guys. Eric Armstead they paid. The only one that they didn't was DeForest Buckner, and I'd argue they got pretty good value in a first-round pick for Buckner. The pick was probably, with Javon Kinlaw wasn't the right decision necessarily, looking back on it, but you would still redo the trade to get that first round pick to be able to go pick someone else. So seemingly they've made the right decision when it comes to these contracts. So we'll get to Brandon Ayuk's next year, and you just trust that they'll do the right thing.
We want to relitigate and re-rank who coaches and quarterbacks and teams are, like a power ranking per quarter is what football fans probably would want. Who's the best first quarter team in the NFL? Let's power rank that. We got to rank everything all the time. Where do you rank Kyle Shanahan into year 7 now as head coach of the 49ers? And outside of Sean McDermott in Buffalo, there is no one who's gotten 7 years with one team who hasn't already won a Lombardi trophy. But I would say Kyle is probably as in safe a shape, even with all the drama as it's been presented and reported upon, as you can find a head coach without a Lombardi trophy in this league.
I completely agree. And I, especially on social media, a lot of people come at me saying that I'm not critical enough of Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch. And I push back and I say they've won 6 playoff games in the last 4 years. And you look across the league, I think only like the Chiefs and maybe like one other team have as many playoff
Only
wins.
the Chiefs. Only the Chiefs have won more playoff games since 2019.
Yeah, and you look at regular season wins since 2019, they're right up there. I think they're top 5.
Yep.
Playoff production, they've been, in 3 NFC title games in 4 years. They've built this extremely talented roster. That isn't to say that they aren't, mistake-free, right? They've made some mistakes when it comes to draft selections or some trade moves, or maybe how they've managed the quarterback position hasn't been the smoothest process. But ultimately, as a fan, are you winning on Sundays? Are you consistently in positions to potentially win a Super Bowl? And they've done that 3 of the last 4 years. They've been in positions to win Super Bowls. A couple bounces, a couple missed plays, a couple calls go the other way. You might look at this differently, right? And it feels like we've gotten into this position where if they don't win a Super Bowl, then it's just a complete failure. And I think in the NFL, especially in these one-game playoffs, where there's so much variance, where there's outside of just talent, skill, all that stuff, there's a little bit of luck involved. There's a little bit of a couple things need to go your way on, en route to a Super Bowl victory. The 49ers just haven't had that over the last, 3-4 years. And poor Kyle Shanahan hasn't really had that since 2016. And so hopefully they get over the hump, but that just doesn't mean that you kick them to the curb. I would say Kyle Shanahan probably like a top 5 coach, especially over the stretch, what he brings to the table offensively. Clearly, all of his players, all those key guys swear by the guy. And so I have a hard time, saying that he should just be on the hot seat if they don't win a Super Bowl or whatever.
Right.
There's certain things that drive me nuts, right? His 4th down decision-making. Sometimes he's a little too conservative. Sometimes he could be a little edgy in some of these press conferences. But outside of that, he's done a lot of winning, and that's ultimately all you can ask for.
Brock Purdy gets voted one of the team's captains. Now, your quarterback should always be falling into that category once he's proven himself, and it just says an awful lot. Like, the 49ers have so much top-shelf liquor, they wouldn't allow a bottle in the well to also be a captain if it didn't deserve it. And it says something about what Kyle thinks of Brock and what the team thinks of Brock. And it's also a really good thing that he's named captain, because that means the team agrees with the decision that he should be starting quarterback.
Absolutely. And this goes further back than just Brock Purdy being voted captain. You go back to last season when he took over as quarterback in that Miami game. And then since then till now, just listen to how the top guys talk about Brock Purdy. Whether they do podcasts with other people or it's interviews or pressers, they speak glowingly about Brock Purdy. And not just the guy, not just his work ethic, what he brings in the games, what he brings in practice, what his demeanor is like. They talk about him like they haven't talked about another quarterback like that in this tenure, at least. And that, I think that speaks volumes, right? The guys in that locker room are so high level that they will never publicly say anything bad about any players, right? But if you listen closely enough, you can tell the difference between when they're going out of their way to be complimentary of a player versus when they're just saying nice things to say nice things in front of the media. And Brock Purdy's an example of where I think they just are really enamored by him. And I was not surprised that he was voted captain. I think that speaks volumes. I mean, he's the youngest guy in terms of experience in that captain's group. And there's a couple other guys that I thought could be deserving that aren't on there, right? whether it's a Christian McCaffrey, a Brandon Ayuk, a Nick Bosa, which I get it with this holdout situation, but this team's got like 10 or 11 guys that are probably worthy of being captain, and they named Brock Purdy, one of the 6 guys. And I think that just speaks a lot about what this locker room thinks of him and how they believe in him as the starting quarterback.
I want to go back to where our conversation started. We started about talking about ticking off boxes, and they got the first 2. What's the third box? What's the third box that the 49ers need to make sure it's officially checked off before they kick off in Pittsburgh?
I think that third box has to do with health. And I think, just during the preseason training camp, they've got a couple key guys that were banged up, right? It starts with George Kittle. I think he's dealing with like a groin or an adductor injury. They've got some guys on the defensive side of the ball. Dre Greenlaw coming back from a soft tissue injury. Tashawn Gibson's been a little banged up. So I think that would be the third box, is make sure that those guys get healthy. They make it to week 1 in Pittsburgh, because I think that's going to be a tougher matchup than maybe we had thought when the schedule came out back in like April, May. Clearly a very formidable opponent. So I think getting as healthy as possible for week 1 is probably that third box to tick.